So after students type essays, they send the essays in, and instead of handing each student their own particular essay, their own specific essay, what we do is basically we take all of the essays and then we grade all of them, and we'll talk about that in a second. But basically, we share everyone's results with everyone else. Obviously, names are redacted, so nobody is embarrassed. And what that does basically is just puts you on a real fast track of improving your writing capabilities. Later on, what is sent in the mail is the arguments roundup. In other words, it's some kind of a collection of all of the essays. The remarks are in blue. Now, this is this is where the magic happens. The question shows up here on top. Here, the instructions are going to appear. The original student response is going to appear here, and the corrected response is going to appear here, as well as score, an approximate score out of 6 points. Now, if you go to the contents, you will just see essays graded 6, so on and so forth. These are clickable, so you won't have to look for it. Let's take one essay for example. In the class, what I do is I actually ask who wants their essay to be graded. It's a humbling / very, very educating, edifying experience. So let's take the first sample essay that was graded 3.5. Let's take a look at the outline. So as I mentioned, you see the question here, you see the original response here, and you see the reproduced response here. Here specifically, the font was 7. Why? Because I have many comments to share with the student. You have specific general comments, but you also have, and this is the meat of the essay, you also have 1 through 15. In this case, the student had 15 points that they didn't pay attention to, that they messed up with just a little bit. So these are clickable, these are searchable, very, very useful. Why don't we start? Just a sample essay, sample analysis. The following appeared in business magazines, so I know it's going to be about business. As a result of numerous consumer complaints of dizziness and nausea, Promo Foods requested that 8 million cans of tuna be returned for testing last year. Promo Foods concluded, as a conclusion, that the cans did not, after all, contain chemicals that posed a health risk. This conclusion is based on the fact that the chemists from Promo Foods tested samples of the recalled cans and found that of the 8 chemicals most commonly blamed for causing symptoms of dizziness and nausea, 5 were not found in any of the tested cans. Oh, so what about 3? The other 3. Chemists did find that the 3 remaining suspected chemicals are naturally found in all other kinds of canned food. Now, when we will talk about how to write an essay, we'll talk about how to break it down, how to look at the cause, at the effect, how to look for alternative explanations for missing data, so on and so forth. This is not about it. This is about the interface that you can exploit later on to improve your writing. So let's see the student's response. Based on samples, chemical, stop. So already here we have some kind of an error. The error is that the sample did not need to be capitalized. However, so you see here all the corrections are made in blue. It's pleasant. It's not red. My apologies. I did need to differentiate it, so I did use a different color for the ink, which is red. But since this particular comment is not that important, I just corrected it and moved on. Chemical results made by Promo Foods chemists. Okay, a couple of things here are wrong. First of all, you can see that there is, in other words, your grader is not only going to tell you, hey, this is a little bit awkward. The grader is actually going to offer what would be a better phrasing. So it's not just passing the ball on to the examiner, to the examinee, to the students. It's also offering them some help as far as the phrasing is concerned, based on sample chemical tests carried out rather than results made, carried out by Promo Foods. Now, if you were to pay close attention here, there's an apostrophe, but the name of the company was Promo Foods ending with an S. So a couple of things. First of all, the name of the company here is incorrect. That's one. And if you take a look here, you have comment number 1. Comment number 1, if I were to go down to the bottom of this document or click on it, I see that comment number 1 says that if the word ends with the letter S, then possession that the student did want to indicate won't be indicated by an apostrophe after, not before the S. For example, promo foods will have to end with an apostrophe after the S. So that was an error. And by the way, most of us make the same errors again and again and again. So it's kind of useful it's very useful to read the comments. That's one. 2, you see another, this is kind of rare because we have 2 footnotes at the bottom of the document. There's no possession required here. Why? Because I can simply say promo foods chemists, right? I don't have to say the chemists which belong to promo foods. It's clear enough. And 3, this is kind of useful. Please simply indicate promo foods from here on in as PF. The reason is, and this is comment number 3, the reason is that if you truncate the company's name or the brand name, it will save you precious typing time. You don't have a lot of time on this examination, so you do want to do whatever it is that you can in order to save time. Later on, PF. So from now on, basically, I have replaced promo foods with PF. PF argues instead of promo foods tuna cans were not the cause, PF argues that its tuna cans were not the cause of numerous complaints of dizziness and nausea. Okay, moving on. Although there appears to be a correlation between consuming PFs, now here there is an apostrophe. It says the name of the company is PF. If I want to say something that belongs to PF, I'm going to indicate an apostrophe and an S. Tuna cans and complaining about various ailments. Comment number 5. Comment number 5, I don't remember it by heart. Keep the items parallel. Actually, parallelism on this examination is very, very, very important. And we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it a bit later on. But if you're saying X and Y, if you're saying X and Y, then the X and the Y or the X and the X have to be parallel to one another. Here, apparently, the student made a mistake. So there is a correlation here. The correction is that there is a correlation between consuming and complaining. So here, well, there seems to be a correlation between users and complaints. It's a little bit less elegant. As you can see, there are also extra words between this, the and that, whereas here it's just consuming, a couple of words, and complaining. It sounds a little bit more eloquent, a little bit more fluent about various ailments. Ailments was a good word, so check mark. So good for you, kudos. After eating contents of such cans, this part is redundant, so basically I just indicated that. PF Laboratories claim to have examined their products. Again, the apostrophe for this particular student is an issue. Product's quality, but it's an easily fixable issue. And determined that there is no health hazard consuming their tuna cans. This argument is unconvincing for several reasons. Most of the arguments that you're going to see on the examination are going to be unconvincing. First, very nicely structured. Second, finally, you can see all of these words basically got a kudos, a check mark. You can also see, by the way, that this paragraph, the paragraph which starts with the word second, was aligned to this. So sometimes I will need to move the paragraphs on the left or paragraphs on the right so that everything is going to align so that the student is going to be able to know quite easily what the mistakes that they made were. There's always a problem with data objectivity when the inquirer has a personal interest in the results. Very good point. Not perfectly phrased. Data objectivity is better than data's objectivity, but cool. It is stated that PF asked its. Now, promo foods activated there, as opposed to promo foods asked its. Footnote number 7, if you look at it, is again a very common mistake that many students make at the beginning, at least. A company is a singular entity. In other words, most people think, and when they are a little bit hasty, they indicate that a company is plural. No, a company is a singular entity that has multiple members within it. So Promo Foods asked its own lab professionals to inspect. So lab professionals in order to inspect? No, lab professionals to inspect. Footnote number 8 is that the correct idiom is ask someone to do something. Moving on. It's canned food. Now, another comment that was very useful here, I think, was that the student, instead of using a semicolon here, the student used a comma and just had written a run-on sentence from here all the way to here. The longer the sentence is, the more likely that the student is going to make mistakes, and there were very many phrasing mistakes, grammatical mistakes here. Instead, what is recommended that you do is that you simply keep the sentences shorter. You can break them out using a semicolon to avoid awkward phrasing. It's a very simple, very useful tip. There have been numerous similar cases in which two labs, only one of which disinterested, and that's a nice word that basically says impartial or unbiased. Student did not use that, so it's also a good clue as to, you know, the vocabulary that you might want to use on the day of the examination and during the training for the examination. So two labs examined the same data only to arrive at utterly different results, as opposed to in which two labs resulted with an utterly different outcome. Once, when an interested party this is incorrect because a party again is singular, have conducted the research, and the other when the lab examinations were conducted by an objective party. It is clear what the student wanted to say, however, it wasn't very eloquent. This is slightly more eloquent. Statement number 10, specifically if I'm not mistaken, yes, refer to the word resulted in results. So simply avoid repeating the same word within a single sentence. Moving on. One such example is the examples are always welcome here. You're always going to get extra points for mentioning them. One such example is the horrific remedia. I'm not familiar with that particular example, but the mistake here that the student did not capitalize remedia, so you need to capitalize brand names. Let's see what the student says about that, which involved baby formula bottles lacking vitamin A. Okay, good. What is vitamin A? A crucial component of baby's healthy growth. That's good. Here it was slightly off, which is crucial for a baby's healthy growth. A little bit less eloquent. Moving on. When the suspicion of footnote number 12. Here's the suspicion of. Here, when the suspicion first arose for. So just simply know your prepositions. This is statement footnote number 12. When the suspicion for poor quality in remedia baby formula, remedia themselves, again, it's not them, it's an it, conducted lab studies in which all formula examined were found exceptionally healthy. Okay, again, slightly awkward. Remedia itself conducted lab tests in which all baby formula bottles examined. It's not the formula that was examined, it's the bottles that were examined, and they were found to be of exceptional quality. Slightly better phrase. Only later, when subjective parties were called upon to conduct tests, was the life-threatening error detected. So again, this is specific for this particular phrasing. This is a slightly better suggestion. But if I did not write this essay, if I'm a student who wants to learn from this essay, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to look at the numbered items here. This is my best bet at improving my score. Second, the argument does not provide sufficient. Sufficient is a very good word. You can use a lot. It sounds brainy, so why not? Details regarding the conditions under which the tests were conducted. For example, it is not stated what was the portion. Portion, another good word. Sample cans out of the 8 million recalled cans. It was a good point, but again, not perfectly phrased. Finally, that was good. The chemist's dismissal of 3 of the 8 chemicals sounds haphazard, good word. It is not sufficiently supported with data or evidence. Again, a slight tick here. The chemist's dismissal. Well, no. Statement footnote number 13 indicates that whenever you're in doubt, just go back to the original question. The question talks about the conclusion is based on the fact that chemists, so here chemists are just indicated in a plural form. So it's not a single chemist possession, but rather the chemists, the possession, the dismissal of the plural chemists, and not the dismissal of the singular chemist. Of 3 of the 8 chemical sounds haphazard and is not sufficiently supported by data or evidence. Grievous, that was nice. Grievous questions arise while reading the chemist's, again, mistake findings. If these 3 chemicals are commonly found in every can of preserved food, then how are they considered to cause these symptoms? Good, not perfect. Grievous questions arise. Chemists' findings of these are found in preserved food. How is it that they are considered to cause these symptoms only in PF products? There was another logical point that was missing here, moreover. So I added it. What were the chemicals' exact quantities in PF's products compared to other commercially available products about which such concerns were not raised? So in other words, yeah, you might have substance X, but there are safe levels and unsafe levels. Maybe in PF there were unsafe levels. That point was not mentioned here, but it is a critical point. It is a very specific point. That is the weakest point of their argument. In conclusion, the argument made by Promo Foods following the questionable lab test is not persuasive. There is not enough data. There is not enough data provided neither regarding the lab members conducting the test nor about the conditions under which the test results were accepted. In conclusion, the argument made by PF following questionable lab tests is hardly persuasive. This is a common mistake, footnote number 14, I mentioned it a lot during the course, data are plural. Data are plural. There is not enough data. It might sound right, but it's incorrect. There are not enough data, or there are insufficient data provided regarding either the identities. Now, another mistake that was here, and it's very tricky to catch these mistakes when you're pressed for time. The student basically said there is not enough data provided neither regarding. In other words, it's like saying, I don't know nothing. It's a double negative. So, footnote number 14 simply says, 15, avoid double negative within a single clause. Your mistake was that you said not and neither within the same clause. So it was corrected here. There are not enough data provided regarding either the identities. So my mistake, it wasn't as perfect, as good as I thought, regarding either the identities of the lab members conducting the tests or the conditions. Again, by the way, pay attention to the similarity, either the identities or the conditions. It's slightly more elegant than neither regarding the lab members nor about. So again, we'll talk about parallelism during the course under which the results were obtained. So this was a sample, this was a sample way of a sample essay to just give you a look into how deeply we examine, how closely we examine every single essay that shows up, how much information you can take from this. By the way, the file doesn't end here. This is page 97. There are 160 pages, if I'm not mistaken, specifically here in the roundup. So if I'm a student who got a 3.5, yeah, it was a very nice first try, but my phrasing in this case is slightly cumbersome. What I would do is I would read all of the essays that got a 4, right? 4 through 6, and I would read all of these comments here, and I would try to learn from other people's mistakes. By the way, these mistakes repeat themselves, especially during the first time people type an essay. So if I were to go through other people's comments, it's going to take me a minute, and then I would avoid mistakes that will have taken me hours upon hours to correct.